Aboard, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Michael D. Shaw is joining me, as is our habit, live on Thursday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Mike, you have a great article up on your Substack, Trump Derangement Syndrome Explained.
Oh,
I thought we'd start with that and maybe go into what I was thinking about also today, which is that I wonder if, to paraphrase Bob Dylan, the times they really are a changing, and I mean that for the better and for the in the real sense. But let's go into a brief history of the modern manifestation of Trump derangement.
Well, I'll start at the end and work back.
Okay.
It's really nothing more than kill the messenger, right? That here's a non-politician that gets involved in an otherwise closed system and exposes, and that's the miracle of it, because it wasn't exactly hiding, but exposes how not only is the system corrupt, but unlike the fabled Richard Daley in Chicago, who was corrupt as hell, at least the city worked. But where it's falling apart is it's corrupt as hell and nothing works, and it just gets worse. So as long as you have a closed system of political hacks, it's not going to change. You're just passing the baton from one idiot to another. And as the article states, I think where Trump derangement really started out, even before all this was exposed, was that he was able to defeat the chosen one, Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton is sort of a mythical figure. Here's someone that was considered the greatest person on earth, who never actually really accomplished anything other than getting into Wellesley and Yale Law School and marrying Bill Clinton. She has an extensive resume consisting of titles and no accomplishments. The joke is, in a typical resume, you say, okay, I was a sales manager for XYZ company, and I increased the revenue from 10 million to $25 million, whatever it is. But her resume is, I have this title, I have that title, I was Secretary of State. What did she ever accomplish? Hiding the fact, by the way, which I just threw in to be nasty, but it was fun, that she failed the DC bar exam.
Mm-hmm.
And she's supposed to be this genius, right?
Yes.
So she did pass the Arkansas bar exam. And that was, strike one, I guess, for Trump derangement. But now, especially after he exposes how all these agencies have done really very little except enrich NGOs, the problems have never been solved. I mean, how come no one ever noticed that? How come all the investigative journalists, like 60 Minutes, never noticed that?
Well, I mean, look, you go into a history of it, going all the way back to Wilson, that you have all of these kind of, aristocratic European-style leaders in this country, starting with Wilson, who are just sort of the equivalent of heredity almost. I mean, they're figureheads. It's everything that, I mean, I recently completed a class in the American Revolution, and there's a left-wing professor who claimed that this guy was even criticized by the left. It was so ridiculous. But the American Revolution, the founding fathers were just secretly British aristocrats and British monarchs, but they wanted to replace the British ones with themselves, and that all their talk about liberty and equality and freedom and property, that was all propaganda to fool the masses, and that they were just transferring over that system. This professor offered no proof of that, but the point is that the very thing that
proof against it, though, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. But I mean, my point is that the very thing that he was talking about from the left is exactly what was happening in this country, starting with FDR, starting with Wilson. We have all of these well-credentialed people with their phony British accents who really have never accomplished anything other than that they can hold their head up in a certain way on television or just whatever. And, they get put into positions. It kind of reminds me of Gilbert and Sullivan's song, Ruler of the Queen's Navy. Do you know about that? He says, when I was a lad, I served a term as office boy to the attorney's firm. I cleaned the windows and I swept the floor and I polished up the handle of the big front door. I polished up the handle so carefully that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy. And it goes on and on in verses. And that's what they were. They polished the handle so carefully that they all were like entitled to these great titles. And yeah, nothing was happening and everything. And it didn't matter, of course, Democrat or Republican. The Bushes are the classic example of this. And, now you have a guy who's like sticking up a stick in the hornet's nest all of a sudden and coming in and saying, look, we want to basically restore the sovereign right of the American citizen and return power from this rotten uniparty oligarchy to the actual people under God. I mean, which was the idea of the American Republic. And they are absolutely going out of their minds.
Oh, yeah. And of course, what I didn't say, and maybe you have an opinion on this, is why didn't anyone ever notice this before? Was it that as long as you're inside of it, you didn't speak against it? So that must include the media.
Even, look at even you and I mean, I'll speak for myself here, but it's not that I didn't notice it, but it was more that I just felt that this was such a inevitable power that you couldn't really think outside of it. It's sort of like thinking about abolishing the IRS. Ain't gonna happen. It's like, it's like something that is such a fact on the ground. I mean, who could ever? I never thought that Roe versus Wade would be overthrown.
Right.
I just thought this is the way it is. This is settled law. I assumed that this was the power that be. Now, I railed against it. I mean, I agreed with the John Birch Society that it had been completely infiltrated by the left and by the communists, but I never really believed that we could change it until now. And I think Trump is coming along, and this is why they are so fearful of him and why they despise his movement. It really is waking up more and more Americans, and they're just going on with the same old playbook. It's not working for them. I'm having this vigorous and nasty debate with, I don't know if you know who John Fugelsang is.
Yeah, vaguely. I haven't read his stuff.
He's a left winger from way back. He's kind of the Boston Phoenix kind of left winger.
Yeah.
The old bull crap we always hear. We've been hearing about it all our lives. Oh, the rich are exploiting us. Just the usual. And that Trump's racist and he's a liar, liar, liar. But the point that, and he's going on with me through tweets, taking me on. He's decided he has to argue with me. And the point that he's missing is that people aren't buying that anymore on either side. That kind of politics. That kind of like gotcha politics, so-and-so. And I pointed out to him, he goes, oh, Trump's a racist. I'm like, why? Can you show something? Because where do you think Obama was born? He asks me. And, as if somehow this is a litmus test to prove someone's a racist if they don't believe Obama was born in the United States. It's like, what does it have to do with his race anyway? I mean, plenty of people have had their birth certificates questioned when they run for president. John McCain's birth certificate was questioned, right? They said, oh, you were born in the Canal Zone. Ted Cruz questioned. He was born in Canada. The point is that, but this is like the kind of politics that they play. And so I pointed out to him, like, well, according to the Hillary Clinton campaign, he was born in Kenya. And that absolutely, him and all the other followers on Twitter went absolutely out of their minds. But the point I'm making is that kind of granule politics, that use of like somebody said something stupid in 1955, or, they said something offensive, big deal, who cares, or they were seen in the lobby with so-and-so who was described as a white supremacist. Aha! It just doesn't work for them anymore. And they're still on that tack. They still believe, they're still talking about Trump as a convicted felon. It didn't work for them. No one bought it. And they're missing the broader point anyway, which is that this is a movement. I mean, the reason why I pointed out to him that Obama he's like, oh, Trump's an anti-Semite. I'm like, really? And that I support anti-Semites because I support Trump. And I said, hey, first of all, are you an anti-Semite because you support Obama? After all, Obama's minister, right, Jeremiah Wright, remember him? Talked about Jews creating the AIDS virus, these weird, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. I mean, it's like, no, I don't assume that he is, and I don't assume that Fugelsang is an anti-Semite for supporting Obama. It's like this kind of guilt by association politics is really outdated on both sides. Nobody buys it.
Yeah, it's completely outdated. And on the left, again, it goes back to that piece about Ethel Rosenberg and the Model UN, that this is the thinking that they've had. So now they have to shoehorn everything into it. It just doesn't work anymore. I mean, frankly, it didn't work that well then, but now it's comical.
It is. And of course, you get a guy like John Fugelsang who assumes, and is to a certain extent rightfully, that this is only going to be used as a weapon in the hands of the left, because the right doesn't do this, and because the left controls the high ground of the media, and they're going to trumpet that, but they're not going to look at the same phenomena occurring on the right. I mean, you want to talk about racist language? Did they ever investigate Biden? I mean, really? Going back to when he was a senator? No. Because I guess that's okay, because after all, he's on the right side of history. But the point is that as a weapon, they're continuing to hold on to that, I think. I think he represents that view. And that remains the mainstream of the
I think that's dying out.
I agree. I mean, it's not relevant. Nobody cares.
It's almost dying out the wrong way, because your friend David Hogg now is operating from the point of view that they're not far enough left, and they have to primary people that don't toe this communist line somehow.
Right, and this is the same policies, the same practices are being done by people like AOC and the whole establishment of the Democrat Party. But my point is that they have really they've lost the bigger picture here, which is what the Trump movement is. And the fact that it's very much what we're talking about here. It's shattering the hologram that we've all been locked into all our lives. And it's taking a look at what exactly is the government doing. And they're opening the lid. They're opening the hood of the car. And we're seeing like Social Security. They say, all of my life I've heard, the Social Security system is going to go bankrupt. You'll never collect it when you need it. Yeah. So why all of a sudden Trump opens the door and Elon Musk does a little forensic audit, and they discover that billions of dollars are going out to people that are over 120 years old, and that tens of billions of dollars are going out to illegal aliens and to people overseas who aren't even American, and to fake addresses, and to, the whole thing is just utterly rife with fraud.
And this is portrayed in the left-wing media as cutting Social Security.
Well, yeah. So the point is, here they are pounding their chest about Social Security. They don't really, it's obvious that they don't want to hear this, and they don't care about it, probably because they're collecting all the money. But I mean, and now we know it's also Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment. All these agencies are being completely defrauded, and everyone is being ripped off. Unemployment, I mean, talk about a fraud. I mean, a lot of this ramped up during the COVID days, when all this money started flying out the door in the tunes of upwards of hundreds of billions of dollars. And, they claim that they want to support good government and they want to save Social Security. Well, That's exactly what Trump is doing. He's saving Social Security.
I mean, it's just all empty statements, and
Yeah.
that's why I really hate the media so much. That if there were really any journalism, you think once in a while they would go after these stories, but they never do. It's like they're doing nothing more than supporting this rotten establishment all the time. How do they live with themselves? I truly don't understand it, right? If you're a reporter at a newspaper, the pay is very low, all right? The working conditions are terrible. So maybe the solace you get is you get to see your name at the top of the article. All right, that's great. All right. Maybe you can actually write something that's not just utter bilge. Now, occasionally, if you saw this piece in the New York Times talking about that helicopter crash by
But
Reagan Air Force.
you notice they buried that toward the end of the article. I mean,
Yeah, it was a 5,000 word article.
Yeah.
And you talk about burying the lead. The last couple of paragraphs show the conclusion that she very likely did it on purpose.
Did it? I mean, I thought it was just
Yes.
maybe that she
Yes.
froze. That she's like, oh, she couldn't hear anything. How could she have done it on purpose? I mean, did she want to commit suicide?
They're trying to figure it out. She disregarded orders and recommendations by others on the craft. The only explanation here is that in their zeal to push through DEI, not that there aren't other qualified female pilots,
Right.
they had to really push this broad through, and she was a psycho. All right.
Maybe, I mean,
So-
my first thought was maybe she's so indoctrinated into DEI that the guy sitting next to her who said, you got to turn, she decided she wasn't going to listen to him because he's a man.
Could be.
I don't know. I mean, you know,
Doesn't make it any better. I mean,
no, it doesn't. It's horrendous. It's evil. I mean, 65 innocent people. I mean, is a horrible tragedy, of course.
so you ask yourself, and you as a student in the media, why in the world do the Times run this piece? Maybe just for clicks?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's like the Boston Globe. Eventually, ultimately, they have to tell some truth to maintain even a veneer of
So
credibility.
you mean now that all the people are cold in the ground?
Yeah, like the Globe will always release the bad news after the election, once they have their puppet in place. Then you hear about it, and they usually will do it like a few days before Christmas, and they'll bury it into the story, just like the New York Times did here. The first half of the story, the upper flap, was all about some cockamamie analysis of, you know, wind factors or like time management or some irrelevant garbage. And then finally, toward the end of the article, they mention it. You have to understand how to read the New York Times. They always do this. The Globe always does this. They'll tell you the truth, but you have to really stay with it and go through it in an insufferable way.
It's based on the assumption, which is generally true, that no one's going to read the whole article.
Well, that's right, because you have to go through all this insufferable garbage to get to it. So most average people don't read that far. You can't. It's so dull. And, you know, so you have to, you know, if you are really wanting to know what's going on, again, you have to know how to read these things. Like in my books, if I want to talk about something that's controversial, I try to find it in the New York Times, and you could go through reams and reams of Googling and digging, but you will find it. It's usually buried, and then you can cite it, and you say, aha, New York Times, page so-and-so, line so-and-so. You know, but the point is that most people don't have the time or the inclination to do that. And so they don't get the truth, or if they finally get to it, it's so marbled with other stuff that you don't get the context at all. So that's how they roll. That's how the mainstream media rolls. It's as bad as ever right now. If you take a look at the Drudge Report, which is completely captured by the mainstream media, it's so negative. And you watch these, you know, the Lester Holtz of the world, They will, it's really bizarre. They'll make it up. I'll even give a recent example, a classic Trump hoax. They're all hoaxes. They showed a picture of Trump at the Pope's funeral wearing a blue suit.
Oh, shit, right.
Right? And they said, you see, he's disrespectful because you're supposed to wear a black suit. Okay, fine. The way the picture is portrayed, you see about 8 or 9 other guys behind him or next to him, all in black suits. And it looks like Trump is the only one with a blue suit. But if you open the lens and you take a picture of about 100 people, it's about half of them have blue suits and half of them have black suits. So it was a completely fake story. And this is what they do, and they're still doing it. I honestly don't think they're getting away with it any longer. Maybe they are, but they keep now saying, "Oh, he's down in the polls." That's complete garbage. The disastrous 100 days. Really? I mean, it's like so negative and so manipulated. I just wonder if they're still getting away with it. I think that they are falling apart. I don't think.
Right. I mean, they're playing to their core audience, which eventually is not a great technique. We've talked a number of times of Sam Francis, who finally started writing what can only be referred to as white nationalist type stories, because he discovered that was his core audience, which was a shame because he was actually a pretty good conservative guy. But as we mentioned on this show a few times, unfortunately, like Sobran, they discovered that, or they thought, and I don't think it's correct, that they wanted to go toward that audience. Sobran,
Right.
not much, but
I mean, and Joe Sobran was, I debated him. I mean, and great writer, and he completely changed with that issue. Something happened. I don't know. I say the same thing about E. Michael Jones.
yeah,
He was, when I first interviewed him, he was tremendous. He did, the word Jew didn't appear in his books. It wasn't even on the radar. I don't know if he wrote what he thought, but it was only many, many years later that all of a sudden he got this bug about the Jews. And these guys like Jake Shields, I don't know if you know who he is. He's World Wrestling Association, a wrestler. He's suddenly got on this anti-Israel thing, this anti-Zionism thing, and he's bringing in other wrestlers to do his podcast. He's a good podcaster, and he's like pushing this stuff. It's really ugly, and it's like he doesn't. I think that it's a similar thing. This is his audience, so this is what he thinks is going to work for him. I don't know what it is, and I've asked him to have me on. He says, "Oh, I won't come. He won't have me on because he wants me to know he hates Zionism, and that he doesn't want to do a screaming show." And I've said, "I'm not going to scream. I don't like screaming either. I mean, it gives me a headache. I'd like to have a respectful, rational conversation with you about this, and really, so we can each present our opinions and let the listeners decide." He won't have me on. But
no, well, the trap is that if you're producing content, it's very easy to think you've discovered some key to the whole situation. And certainly, you can find a lot of notorious Jews that have been involved in some very nefarious things. But
right.
to keep going down that road is going to distort your thinking, okay? Because there are just so many non-Jews that have been involved in these causes.
Right.
So unfortunately, human nature isn't always that easy. And in my own case, I've written a lot of articles, and sometimes you get to the point where you think you're writing the same article every time, but you can't try to lob on to one thing that's the cause for all the world's ills. It's
very simple. Yeah, and that's what people do. It's the Jews or it's whoever.
Now, I'll tell you one that would be difficult to pass, and it's occurring right in your backyard.
What's that?
The Burlington School District
Mm-hmm.
is in the news now. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have. What's going on with Burlington schools?
Okay. Apparently, they engaged in an extremely invasive sex questionnaire for kids from 6th grade through 12th that you couldn't opt out of.
Oh, that's nothing new. Is that recent? I mean, is this?
Over the last week.
Yeah, because that's happened before. They had the Lexington scandal. I don't know. They called it Fistgate. Leave it. We'll let people draw their own conclusions. This was in the 1990s, I think around 2000, 2001. And this father was like, he pulled his son out of the school and he complained to the principal, and it created a huge uproar amongst the school department. They had him taken out and put in handcuffs. This is a father, right?
Yeah.
And it became a big story in Massachusetts for quite a while. I should revisit it. It's been a while, but that kind of thing goes on here, where you have the school go in, swoop in behind closed doors, and they do this sort of sexually explicit stuff, and then they disappear. They kind of like it's a change agent thing. Somehow the kids get the message that they better not complain about it to the parents.
Well, what happened in this case was they said, "Oh, it was a mistake. We were supposed to send you the email allowing you to opt out, and I guess we didn't do that." Say BS. So you can make a pretty cogent argument about who the hell is running these schools. Why is it so important? How is that going to benefit anybody? What's the follow-up? As a marketing guy, fine, you can do a survey, what things you want, what new features you want in the product. But if I do a survey on kids, explicit sexual questions, all right, great. What are you going to do with it now? You're going to try to groom the kid?
They're going to corrupt the kid. Look, I mean, I remember, attending a session with somebody from Planned Parenthood at my daughter's school. This was like maybe 10th grade, 9th grade. And they were introducing their sex ed program, which was very explicit and, highly sexual. And the explanation given by this woman who was the head of Planned Parenthood, and you should have seen this woman. Talk about bizarre. I mean, she had all the classic leftists with the Tourette syndrome going and the facial tics, and somebody who obviously was not very comfortable in her own skin. Her explanation was, look, sex is everywhere. It's on the subway walls, it's in the billboards, it's on television, it's in the media, it's in the news. Your child is exposed to sex everywhere, so why not have it in the schools? And my response was, well, that's all the more reason to not have it in the schools. Maybe it could be a refuge for the child to get away from all this smut. Maybe they could then go to a place where they could actually focus on real things like how to do arithmetic, maybe, right? Or how to, learn how to read using phonics, or maybe read a copy of the U.S. Constitution, learn a little civics. Do they really need to have this? I mean, this is like, it's like, it's kind of like I wrote this essay about critical race theory, the same deal. Does that actually contribute to something that's going to help a child develop a skill or to think cognitively on their own? It's quite the opposite. It's crumbling their moral compass at a young age when they're not really
teach
able
them to be a victim if they're of the oppressed race.
Well, that's critical race theory. Everyone's divided up into straight white men and everyone else. And the straight white men are to feel guilty for their success because they've exploited everyone. It's just warmed over Marxism is all it is. It's the warmed over dialectic, except they put in new figures to create this oppressor, and oppressed. But the point is that this stuff is dangerous for children. It's corroding their ability to think cognitively and their innocence and their ability to develop a moral code. Obviously, and that's exactly what it's meant to do. I have Sam Blumenfeld echoing in my mind. The late Dr. Sam Blumenfeld wrote a ton of good books about this. It is a deliberate and conscious effort to dumb children down. And he pointed out that it was a very unholy alliance between the right and the left, you might say, like the right being the business community, the Rockefellers, people who wanted to have a pliable population that would punch a time clock at the big factories back in the 1930s. That kind of economy isn't around anymore, but back then they wanted massive employers, showing up, punching the clock, and they sit in there for 8 hours. And then on the left, you had people like John Dewey, the father of so-called progressive education, who was a socialist and who wanted to dismember a student's ability to think independently and cognitively, and replace that with what he called fusion. In other words, a move toward collectivism and world order. They both were working on the same cause. They wanted to create a person that would become a, quote, human resource, as opposed to a human being, a resource for someone else. And they would all be happy and move along not knowing this. I mean, the most modern example of that, of course, is Klaus Schwab, right? From the World Economic Forum. You will eat the bugs, right? I mean, nobody will own it.
Though, that's what's coming out is that he was pretty corrupt.
Oh, yeah, sure.
He was forced to resign. But the silver lining in this over-sexualized education of the kids is that it forces the parents to get involved with this at a younger age. I mean, I happen to be talking to my 11-year-old grandson, and he was making fun of the way that they're trying to ramrod this stuff in the classroom.
Great.
So
they're not buying it.
Well, I mean, he happens to be fairly bright. Maybe some of the other kids are buying it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he happens to have parents and a grandfather who knows the score.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's exposed to what the hell is going on at some level, and I'm sure he picks up on that. But a lot of people aren't, because their parents were part of the Dewey establishment. The parents are doing like sex change surgeries on their children without, or allowing that because they think there's some virtue to that.
It's progressive.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I should ask John Fugelsang what he thinks of that. Maybe that'll be my next question to him.
Would Ethel Rosenberg have been in favor of sex change surgery?
Probably. Yeah. It's the greatest. It's the ultimate manifestation of the left. You can change. They want to change human nature. Well, this is literally trying to change the human being. Yeah. And this is on children, doing the most ghoulish and despicable. I mean, it's worse. It's actually worse than anything Mengele came up with, or the Nazis, because at least the Nazis, as evil as they were, they knew what they were doing was evil, which is why they tried to keep it secret. These people are like,
that's a key point.
Yeah, I mean, they think that there's a virtue to this. I know a doctor, I'm not going to mention names, who is involved in this, and this is someone who feels quite righteous about it. They're very filled with a sense of mission. There's no connection to what the hell they are actually doing.
Do you think there's ever going to be a Bernard Nathanson of the transgender surgery movement? Some guy that's done thousands of these things comes out and, like the prodigal son, comes back. So far, I haven't seen one.
I haven't seen it, and I have a feeling that we've reached, in that particular milieu, it has reached a tipping point where you're not going to see it. They're so far into this that it'll never be cracked. But the rest of us, I mean, this is what I started the program talking about here. The rest of us, the rest of the country is, I believe, or I wonder, maybe you might think otherwise, but they are starting to wake up. The Trump movement, it's becoming so obvious. The attacks on Elon Musk. I saw a bumper sticker actually earlier today. Stop Elon. Really? You mean you want to, cutting the size and scope of government, getting rid of corruption, consolidation? that's something that, they're not, I don't know if they're aware of what they're opposing.
Well, I think the other thing that plays into this, and would have made my article too long, and I actually had one that I wrote about this a long time ago, is this kind of worship of authority. So if I tell you now that you're 60 something years old, that everything you believed about authority, and I think this happened a bit during COVID with the NIH, the FDA, the CDC.
It was a complete experiment in how far authority could go.
So I guess I was blessed, and maybe you were too. I didn't know you when you were young. I never liked authority, even as a little kid. I kept my mouth shut, but most people, I think, just buy into it. And imagine having this revelation now when you're 60 years old or whatever. Hey, this was all BS. It's got, in fact, I may have mentioned in previous shows, I got actually banned from the American Council of Science and Health because I had the gall to suggest that Tony Fauci was a fraud.
Yeah.
And I was thrown off, can't comment, can't do anything, which is fine. I got off their mailing list, whatnot. But for someone to still be defending Tony Fauci at this late date is absurd. And I was extremely disappointed, by the way, when I pointed out to some of my friends there, I'd written articles for that group. And I said, well, Henry banned me and so on. I expected, frankly, and I was stupid, I guess, that my friend would overturn it. So no, I mean, it's just part of this giant establishment. And as it applies to healthcare, another thing that came out today was the DOJ is going to be looking into the miserably corrupt medical journal industry.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was kind of exposed during COVID, right? New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, writing that article attacking hydroxychloroquine, which we still can't mention on YouTube, by the way. You'll get banned. But I mean, that's obviously completely corrupt. It's I mean, all this sort of infiltration by this leftist internationalist establishment goes way back, but they definitely have taken over those medical journals and the entire edifice of medicine. They started in the 1920s and they took over all the libraries, and they took over, the book publishing industry after Harry Elmer Barnes published his book, The Perpetual War for Perpetual Peace, in the 1920s. That's when they stopped all of the criticism of World War I. And since then, they've completely controlled it. There have been some.
Whatever happened to him anyway?
He was branded an anti-Semite, and he was kicked out of the public life. I mean, he was just complete, and he was one of America's most revered historians. And he went up against, I don't even know if he knew he was going to be going up. He was just doing an honest job as a historian when he wrote that book. But he kicked, it's like what Trump does. He kicked a hornet's nest, and they came out. And for him, that's what happens. But I guess that my question is, have we reached a tipping point? I mean, is this, to paraphrase Bob Dylan, are the times a changing?
Oh, I think so. I mean, you notice on CNN, they brought in their token conservative, Scott Jennings.
Yeah.
But they allow him to talk quite a bit.
And he's quite good. And now he's talking about running for the Mitch McConnell seat in Kentucky. I hope he does.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, they have to. They think they can control these people, but ultimately they have. I mean, we now know. I mean, this is something Jeff Kuna pointed out on WRKO, another guy who's telling the truth, that they're all funded by USAID, right? That's why they stayed in business. That's why they didn't. We were talking about this. How are these companies able to keep in business when they're losing audience? When it's because they were on the take. They're
Yeah.
getting checks from USAID, US taxpayers, all these years. I mean, so that's why. And that's why they were able to control the dialogue. But now the USAID, it's being cut off. So, they're going to have to start to figure out. I mean, even the New York Times has had to lay people off recently.
Well, here's the let's kick the hornet's nest again. What about suspending habeas corpus for the illegals?
Trump is talking about it. He mentioned it at the last cabinet meeting. There are 3 presidents that have. I think it might be a little bit beyond, a little too much, but 3 presidents have suspended habeas corpus.
Lincoln, Grant,
Lincoln,
your favorite, FDR.
yeah, well, Lincoln did it because during the Civil War he had a problem with Southern subversives in the North. They called them Copperheads.
Yeah.
And Grant did it because after spending a weekend with Frederick Douglass at the White House, Douglass noted of the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. And Grant viewed that as an insurrection. He felt like this is going to be another civil war. We just went through this. We're not going to have it again. So he suspended habeas corpus on them, and he deputized General Sheridan, I think, and put him as the head of a brigade. And he went down to the South and he cracked their heads and ended the Ku Klux Klan. Didn't come back until Wilson. And then
funny thing.
Birth of a Nation, and it became popular again. And then, of course, FDR did it to intern the Japanese. Yeah. I'm not saying that was a good thing to do. It wasn't. It was overkill. But that's why they did it. It was in wartime. I don't know if Trump. I mean, I think he really will need to make a case that these gangs are literally, and he can make that case that if they're not dealt with now, we're going to see serious. We're going to see stuff like what happened in Gaza, in this country. Where they're going to start to slaughter people, and surge across the border and just wipe out villages. I think that the better solution, in my opinion, would be like, for example, with the Maryland man, right? We know who we're talking about. Yeah. They might have a technicality about that, which they may use if they take back the House to impeach Trump on, because technically there was some judge somewhere who said he can't be sent to his home country of El Salvador because of a gang, and he got some injunction. He got some judge to agree with him. And Trump has said that he wants to comply with all of these crazy Marxist judges and their subversive movement. So therefore, I think what he needs to do is get the Maryland men back here, and the Trinidad gang that Boasberg has said have to come back. Bring them back in chains with leg irons. Get them off the plane onto American soil. And then ICE has to immediately put them into a paddy wagon and take them to Gitmo, where they can sit there for the next 20, 30 years while all these radical judges figure out what to do. But it complies with that way Trump is not going to have to worry about more impeachments, and he doesn't have to worry about, technically not observing these stupid laws, these unconstitutional laws, and you can let the system work itself out. Keep them in America. I know it's expensive, but it's worth the price. Get them off the street and put them in Gitmo, or maybe build our own CCOT like they have in El Salvador. Maybe build it in Alaska or something. And just put these people away.
Well, the only problem with that is that opens the door to bring all these people back and not send them out in the first place. And the trouble with that is that avoids the key confrontation here, which is, wait a minute, I'm the president, you're some lowly district judge, I'm not going to listen to you. You don't have national authority.
That's true. And yet, you're probably right. It would open the door. They'd probably start demanding that millions of people who have been deported are brought back. Yeah, that might be, something.
The issue that has
to
be
stand up, and you have to draw the line.
This ridiculous notion that a federal judge, district court, has some national standing. Um, I don't know where that came from. I think there's case law going back decades. It was never really fought, but
Well, it's
I,
not going to work. It's not going to work either. It's going to take some time.
yeah,
I mean, already I understand that Hakeem Jeffries is telling Democrats, stop going to El Salvador. This doesn't look good. And yeah, right, it's not a good look. And especially since more stuff is coming out about him, they're very evil. And
they always pick the wrong poster boy.
yeah,
That's what's so funny about this to me. The other problem is, and this is, another reason I'm not a politician. You're talking about why you have to respect the courts, respect it. You know what? The courts suck.
oh, I know.
Congress is useless. I'm sorry. If you think Congress,
I
the
know.
reality of Congress is Jim Jordan doing these television moments.
He's full of. He just cares about getting his fat face on television. He's completely useless. They could take away. They could abolish these courts. The Constitution only had the judiciary's Article 3 of the Constitution talks about the Supreme Court, and that's it. And state courts. These federal courts in 10 districts and their appeals division and all of it could be simply outright abolished, or at least they could take away their pay. They could do things to move their power out, because this is a huge and very dangerous expansion of judicial power.
Well, it's a dangerous expansion, and the trouble is that most of these people aren't very good, as I've argued.
No, and there are a lot of them are radicals, and this is it's lawfare, and they're openly and brazenly. I mean, there's this one judge, I don't know if it's a federal or state judge in California, who has just declared that the Border Patrol cannot apprehend people coming over the border. They need a warrant, she says, before they're seized. Really? I mean, that's
you're supposed to know who it is that's coming and have the warrant pre-printed.
Yeah. This is such an outrageous.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's going to have to come to a head, all right?
So maybe there will have to be a suspension of habeas.
It's gotten completely corrupt.
Yeah.
And what people are taught in school, unfortunately, is garbage, all right? I made a study of, just for the hell of it, so I was writing articles about the so-called landmark Supreme Court cases, all right? They're all crap. Every single one is garbage, all right? And why they're raised up as some, momentous thing, it's all crap. It's been stuff that it's some sort of psyop. I mean, you could take a recent one, like the reason Roe was defeated was someone was testifying against their own interest. She had already had the baby. So the plaintiff had no interest in the case. Why wasn't it just throw it out?
The whole thing was set up. I mean, all our cases are set up like that. They recruit people. I mean, the Scopes trial. I mean, Scopes was recruited by the local ACLU. They put ads in the paper trying to get a teacher to challenge to take the fine and then sue the district, and that's what he did. I mean, they're great. They say it's great because they're reinventing and rewriting the Constitution and creating law out of thin air, which is why they think it's great. I mean, it goes back to John Marshall in the case of Marbury versus Madison, right? It was whether or not the Jefferson administration had the right to fire Marbury, who had been appointed by Adams in the last days of his administration, and that one of the byproducts of that case was that the Supreme Court received the ability to engage in what they call judicial review, that they could then decide cases that really were kind of not of their business. The irony, of course, with Marbury versus Madison is that now it's been overthrown. by judges who were saying, no, you can't fire you can't fire people. I mean, the Supreme Court ruled
Well,
that
right. I mean,
robbery could be fired.
don't pass over that so quickly. All right.
Yeah,
Here is the lead bar case of all lead bar cases, and it doesn't have any standing anymore in reality, right?
exactly. It was the founding case of their greatest hero, John Marshall, the father of the modern judiciary. I mean, Jefferson also. I mean, he warned the country about judges who are out of control. He wanted to have Marshall arrested. I think he wanted to have him hanged. Marshall, Marshall, left Washington. He was like on his horseback. That's why they
Things
called.
were simpler back then, you know.
Yeah. Oh, well, back then they didn't mess around, but he would travel from city to city when Jefferson was in office because he was afraid he was going to be seized. I mean, I'm just saying that it was kind of a separation of powers issue, but yeah, I mean, you can't have a judicial tyranny. I've come to realize that that's what Israel was dealing with. That's why there was this, and then George Soros stepped in and he started to agitate on the street, trying to have a color revolution against Netanyahu. Now, I'm not a big defender of Netanyahu, but nevertheless, he's the elected head of the government, and he was trying to do some judicial reform. That these people are making up these things right on the bench. They're making up. They're too powerful, and now I can realize that he's right, because that's what's happening here. That's what's happened in Brazil. You had that crazy Judge Moraes decide that Lula gets to get out of prison after he'd been convicted and installed as the new president, and Bolsonaro is going to be put in prison. That's judicial overreach. It's not constant. It runs against. They claim they're in favor of democratic principles. You can't get any less democratic than these unelected people who are there acting as kings.
Yeah.
And that's what we're dealing with right now in this country.
I mean, we need to take a hard look at these revered institutions, and me being the cynic that I am, So I think at some point there's going to have to be a fight over this, because the empowerment of the judiciary, it goes back a long, long time. The famous Miranda decision.
Right. I mean, even like Michael Glennon, the author of Double Government, talks about how the deep state, or what he calls the double government, have infiltrated the court system. He points out that Rehnquist, Chief Justice Rehnquist, was like Nixon's head of the chief legal counsel when he wrote up a memorandum basically allowing the CIA to destroy, to do all kinds of stuff that's unconstitutional. I forget the name of the case. I should have that here. I should look it up. But it was very draconian, and it was completely against the Constitution. It gave them the right to imprison people without facing their accuser or knowing even the charges against them. And then when Rehnquist was on the Supreme Court, there was another case that was based on this case. It was Laird versus someone. Laird was the Secretary of Defense under Nixon. I'll look it up. Melvin Laird. And Rehnquist said, "Oh, I don't remember doing this." When he was asked to recuse himself. Really? He wrote the whole thing. I mean, Glennon was correct in this piece where he points out that this is the double government. I mean, these people were connected to the CIA. They were connected to the national security apparatus in this country that wanted to expand its powers, and they were using the judiciary to do it. So we now have the judiciary being used in the same way they tried to use them against Trump during his exile. They were trying to put him in prison and bankrupt him and kill him. Now they're doing it to the entire country in the form of telling the chief executive that he cannot deport people, that you can't revoke visas from people because the State Department has them on terrorist lists. They're supporting activities that are aiding and abetting our enemies, that they can't be they can't lose their visas. I mean, it's completely un-American, and it's a complete abrogation. I mean, it's a seizure of power that is unprecedented, and no one's talking about it. No one's doing anything. As you say, Jim Jordan will get up and he'll start, babbling. He's not doing diddly squat. None of them are.
No, I mean, the only branch that's doing anything right now is the executive.
Exactly. And they're on all cylinders. They're absolutely the most amazing. I mean, the stuff that administration is really cooking.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear some of their off the record meetings when they talk about this. They know exactly what's going on. I'm a little worried about Pam Bondi. Okay, fine. I would have rather see Matt Gaetz in there, but nevertheless,
I agree, but I think you needed to put somebody in that would get confirmed. All right. Yeah. She's not as much of a hard ass as everybody on our side wants, but
it bothers me that she's dragging her feet on the Epstein file. I mean, especially now that that poor young woman has committed suicide.
Yeah, I don't think anybody believes that.
Yeah, and meanwhile, it's pretty scary stuff. And is that part of the Clinton death list? I don't know. Could be. The point is that they need to get that thing out. I don't care. I mean, that bothers me that maybe she's scared. I don't know. They're just not doing it. So we'll have to see what happens.
Well, you'd like to see someone in there who's harder edged, but then you have to balance this, and it wouldn't bother me, but how much of this crap can the public stand being exposed? You and I are perfectly capable of accepting the fact that it's all corrupt, it all sucks, it always has been corrupt, but I'm afraid that to use that Jack Nicholson line, you can't handle the truth, there may be something to that.
Well, I mean, they have arrested a couple of judges who are obstructing justice and who are harboring terrorists, and now Homan, who I think is great, he's like, there's going to be some politicians next if they're going to obstruct our ability to function. And I'd love to see one of them.
Oh yeah, I think that ultimately that's going to be the way to do it. And even the very liberal Supreme Court of Wisconsin put this Milwaukee broad that got arrested, they put her on leave or whatever, suspended her, I think was the term, because they could see the walls closing in.
Yes. I'd love to see Michelle Wu be next, but that's not going to happen. And I don't think they would with her because she just had a baby. I mean, she's a mother. It would not be a good look. Let's just face it. I mean, public image is something. And she's got other troubles in terms of corruption anyways, which the Boston Globe is not going to talk about. But people are becoming more aware of it every day in this state. Meanwhile, you have in Massachusetts a new state auditor, Diane DiZoglio, who ran on the position that she wanted to do a full forensic audit of the state government, the state legislature. And they are refusing to let her do it. And they're not answering why, because they know that if she does it, that whole rotten edifice is going to collapse when people start to see what kind of money was spent on not just illegal aliens coming into the state while we're bankrupt, but how much money? I mean, it's sort of like a statewide Doge. How much money was given to different? I mean, we saw from Doge already that like Chelsea Clinton, they paid for her wedding, $1 million. They gave her a house, which is I think worth $10 million. Who else is getting money? I mean, on a state level, if we did an audit in this state,
I think Maura Healey would be in favor of cleaning things up.
You think? I mean, there's a complete stonewall, and
I think so. I mean, it goes back to my piece. I think that if you're a true believer, all right, and it's coming out that this was all crap, that's got to be a very, very hard thing to take. All right.
But if it
You
happens,
spent your whole life.
no, I think if it happens in the state, it's going to create a revolution. And I think people in Massachusetts are going to really be willing to see it and know.
This is where it started, baby.
Exactly. That's why the British evacuated on evacuation day. They could see that they weren't going to win. And they sent people out into Lexington and Concord. The countryside was riddled with snipers. They ran back to Boston. They didn't walk. I mean, they were terrified because Boston was lit up. People in this state were fighting. They were like, we're not going to take this. And they know that could happen again. They'll be driven so far out of town. It's so rotten here. It's been that way as far as I can remember. And if DeZoglio gets, people, they're demonizing her. She just got a special, like in the last election, there was a referendum to do a full state audit that she sponsored. And it won substantially. We're talking like about 70%. That's big.
Yeah.
And they won't do it. They will not allow it. And they're trying to make her look like some kind of crank. They're demonizing her. It's not working. And I think that the walls are closing in. And if it does, and they open that rotten can of worms, oh my God, it's going to be an incredible thing.
Well, here's hoping. But there's people who just flat out corrupt. But there's also people that believe this. They honestly believe, like all your liberal friends, no, this is great, and this is the cause. And if you come back and say, no, it was the same thing during COVID, that I would encounter people that knew I was right, but refused to accept that the grand and glorious Wizard of Oz was wrong.
Oh yeah, I mean, average people were totally terrified by it, but there were people in the know who basically buckled under to that. My own doctor became a different person. She knew it was all a lot of crap. I mean, I talked with her at the beginning about it. We were both laughing about this. I mean, she has patients who she will never leave the house again. And then I saw her maybe about 9 months later, and it was like she was a different person.
Yeah.
Somebody got to her, and she was just all shut down, would not laugh at all, told me that I was wrong. That was that. And you spend 8 years going to medical school, you have a profession, you could lose your job. I mean, that's why a lot of people in the media won't talk about the election of 2020. They would never mention that because they'll lose their job. It's that simple. You get used to a certain standard of living. You've worked all your life to get there. They don't have the courage to do it. And, Rush Limbaugh wouldn't even go to certain places because he'd lose his position. He knew that. I think he got a lot done, and I admired Rush. But there were a couple of areas where he would not touch because he knew that if he did, somebody could pull the plug and he'd be gone. It was that simple. So he worked within the system. He pushed the envelope, but he never quite crossed into certain things because he knew that he'd be gone if he did. It's that simple.
That's a good point, because a contemporary of his, of course, was Michael Savage.
Right.
More hard-edged.
And they pulled the plug on him.
Yeah, he paid the price. Yeah.
He's still great. He still does it. He's not quite at the prime of his energy, but he's still doing what he does. He still has a podcast. But they pulled the plug on him. Right? I mean, Newsmax, who was the head of Newsmax, his name escapes me right now, who wrote the book, The Murder of Vince Foster.
Yeah, I'll think of it in a minute.
Ruddy, Christopher Ruddy.
Ruddy.
He did a 180-degree turn. Somebody got to him.
Yeah.
Now he has a very successful. Look, I admire Newsmax, but they won't go certain. There's certain parameters that they don't cross. It's just that simple, because they want to stay in business. They have to kiss up to a certain extent to this rotten international satanic establishment.
Well, see, that's what happens. They want to grow their media outlet. And this is why I follow, and you probably do also, some what you might call fringe places, because they don't really care about,
No,
they're not going to be huge guys, and you get some good material. And maybe they either get money from other places, they're independently wealthy, they don't care. And I don't even know the full story on a guy named Gary Michael Voris, where he had a pretty good thing going with a conservative Catholic thing, got shut down. He reemerged. He moved from the Detroit area to Houston. Now
right.
he's got Souls of Liberty. And it's a very nice combination of conservative Catholicism, political commentary. But you're right. There's going to be a limit on how big it
Not
can
that
be.
this is a great source, but according to E. Michael Jones, Voris is a homosexual who is doing, grooming, and he's into all kinds of stuff. I'm not saying that's true.
He was accused of that. He admitted to formally being in that life.
Right.
So he's got the prodigal son story.
And I think maybe Jones is only bringing it up because I think he's criticized Jones.
Yeah.
So that can become like these people can get very, like personal and kind of attack.
Well, that's why, and it takes a lot of effort, as you know. You've got to hit multiple sources to form your own synthesis, if you will, of the truth. And it makes it interesting, and sometimes it's too much work.
And you can't always get to it totally because you can't be in the room. You have to kind of use. I mean, this is I'm sorry to even bring this up, but Norman Finkelstein, the author of the Holocaust Industry, is very unpopular, very disliked in Jewish circles. He was partially right about that, but he had a huge fight with Alan Dershowitz. And Dershowitz accused it really nasty. He accused his mother of something. I don't know what it is, something completely ridiculous. And Finkelstein happened to be in a restaurant in Washington, D.C., and Dershowitz was there. And his friend said, "Oh, look, there's Alan Dershowitz. Why don't you go over and say something to him?" And he's like, "I don't think so." But eventually he did. Yeah. And he sat down and he goes, "Why did you say that about my mother? You knew that was not true." And Dershowitz said, "Because you were attacking me. That's why." But, it's like, that's what it comes to.
Yeah.
You're willing to throw a lie about somebody and smear somebody because, to win an argument or to stop somebody. But that's what they all do, it seems. That's like Michael Jones with Voris. I mean, they don't like, they don't like what he was saying, or they don't, whatever. So they'll toss something out, they'll just try to discredit them in any way they can. It's a dirty.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the full story on Voris, but he did suffer. So in fact, his organization disappeared, and he had to kind of reemerge again.
I don't know the story either, but I don't think he deserved that kind of an attack.
No.
And to me, it gets into, rivalries. It's personal. It's like, people. I mean, Fugel saying this he's attacking me on Twitter. I'm a liar, he says, and I'm aligned with racists because I support Trump.
Yeah.
This kind of politics is just, I mean, it's really stooping. And
one of the things with Jones and maybe with Voris is that maybe Jones thinks that Voris isn't anti-Semitic enough.
That's probably, probably Voris said something positive about Israel. Exactly. And so he must be, that's right. Something that probably is what it is. So anyway, Mike, what's coming up? Great Substack.
Well, yeah.
I linked to it on the show.
Again, the thing that makes it a little difficult to write these pieces, staying in the political realm, is that I'm sure you agree with this, that you've got to come up with new material rather than just rewriting the same article every time.
No, it's very hard work.
And I've already gotten some comments on this thing, and we'll probably have to go another direction on the next one, and maybe the topic which we created here is what the hell's wrong with the other two branches of government. Executive is the only one that seems to be working now. So
that's right, and they're working in spades, and I thank God. I pray for them every day.
oh yeah,
And they are changing the landscape of politics. I don't think we'll ever go back to where we were. And the other side is losing. They are, retreating into this trivial kind of gotcha stuff. No one believes it. No one cares. So we said something stupid in 1989. Really? It's like, I mean, it's a waste. They're wasting everyone's time. Anyway, Mike, thanks so much as always for joining me.
all right, and we will see you next time.